My name is Vanessa. I am 17 years old, and the moment I watched my family's car pull out of our driveway on New Year's Eve morning with my mom in the passenger seat, my dad driving my younger brother Tyler fighting with my older sister Madison over the back window, and nobody even glancing back to see if I was coming, was the moment I realized I had spent my entire life being the kid they forgot, and this time I was not going to let them forget what that felt like. It started that morning when my mom was running around the kitchen like a tornado, packing coolers, filling bags, yelling at everyone to hurry up because we are leaving in 20 minutes and get your stuff in the car right now. And I was upstairs finishing an essay that was due the day we got back from winter break, and I heard the car doors slamming, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I looked out my window just in time to see our car backing down the driveway, and I ran down the stairs so fast I almost fell, and I burst through the front door in my pajamas, barefoot on the frozen driveway, waving my arms, screaming, wait, I am not in the car yet. But the music was blasting and the windows were up, and nobody turned around, nobody saw me, nobody cared, and I stood there watching the taillights disappear down our street, my breath coming out in white clouds, and I whispered to the empty cold air, they forgot me. They actually forgot me. And I walked back inside, my bare feet numb from the ice, and I sat on the couch and stared at my phone, waiting for anyone to notice I was missing. I called my mom 6 times, and every single call went straight to voicemail, and I texted the family group chat, hello, I am still at home, did anyone notice? And I waited 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 entire hours sitting alone on that couch, wrapped in a blanket, jumping every time I heard a car outside, thinking maybe they realized, maybe they turned around, maybe they actually cared, but nobody came. And finally at 6 o'clock at night, my mom texted back, oh my God, Riley, I am so sorry, we thought you were already in the car. We are at the lake house. Now it is too far to drive back tonight. You will be fine, right? There is food in the fridge, see you tomorrow. That was it, no phone call, no actual apology, just a text message like I was a forgotten item on a grocery list, not her daughter. And I stared at those words, you will be fine, right? Like it was a question she did not actually want an answer to, and something inside me cracked wide open, not sadness, not yet, just this cold, clear anger. And I opened my notes app and I started writing a list every single time they had forgotten me, every birthday where Tyler got a huge party and I got a card in the mail, every school event where I sat alone in the audience watching Madison get all the attention, every family photo I had to beg to be included in every moment. I was the afterthought, the backup plan, the invisible kid. I titled that note Evidence, because that is exactly what it was. And that night, while my family was at my aunt's lake house toasting champagne and counting down to midnight, at the biggest party of the year, I sat alone in our dark living room, and I opened my phone camera and I turned it to face myself, and the only light was the glow from the screen, making my face look ghostly and tired. And I said quietly, it is 11:58 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and I am completely alone. My family left without me. They did not come back. They told me not to be dramatic. I paused and looked straight into that camera lens and said, if you are watching this, it means I finally showed someone what it is really like to be the kid nobody remembers. And I saved that video, and I sat there in the dark and waited for midnight. And when the fireworks started exploding outside, I did not go to the window. I did not watch. I just sat there on that couch and cried so quietly that nobody who was not there could hear me. The next day they came home, loud and laughing, smelling like bonfire smoke and grilled food, and my mom called out, Riley, we are back, like it was just a normal Sunday, like nothing had happened. And I stayed in my room listening to them unpack downstairs, listening to them talk about how amazing the party was, how everyone asked where I was, and I heard my mom lie and say Riley was not feeling well. She stayed home to rest, and I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, thinking you did not even check if I was okay. You just made up an excuse, so you did not look bad. Madison knocked on my door and opened it without waiting for an answer and said, hey, you okay? Mom feels bad, but like it was an honest mistake. We thought you were in the car already. And I looked at her and said, an honest mistake you did not notice I was missing for 4 hours. And she shrugged and said, Riley, you are always doing Your own thing, we figured. You were reading or listening to music or whatever, and she left my door open like she had done her sisterly duty, and I grabbed my notebook and my phone, and I thought about every report card they never signed, every permission slip I had to forge, every birthday card with those generic words. Hope you have a great day. Love, Mom. I did not go downstairs for dinner, and when my mom called me, I texted back, not hungry. And an hour later she came to my room with her arms crossed and said, "What is going on with you? Why? Are you acting like this?" And I said, calmly, like what? And she rolled her eyes and said, like we committed some crime. We said we were sorry. It was a mistake, Riley. People make mistakes. And I said, Mom, you did not even realize I was not there until 6 p.m. That is not a mistake. That is neglect. Her face went bright red and she snapped, do not use that word. We feed you, we house you, we pay for everything you need. You have no idea how good you have it. And I said, so as long as I am fed, I should just accept being forgotten. You left me alone on New Year's Eve, the one night families are supposed to be together, and your response was, you will be fine, right? Do you have any idea what that feels like? And she stared at me and shook her head and said, you are being ridiculous and dramatic. I am going back downstairs. When you are ready to stop playing the victim, you can join us. She left, and I was not playing the victim. I was done being one. In the next week, when I went back to school, winter break over and classes starting again, my psychology teacher, Mrs. Chen, announced our new semester project, and she said, you will document a personal case study of family dynamics and present your findings to the class. And I felt this cold smile spread across my face because I knew exactly what my project would be. I titled it, The Invisible Child, a Case Study in Parental Neglect in Family Hierarchy, and I included everything: my timeline of forgotten events, screenshots of unanswered texts, the video I recorded on New Year's Eve sitting alone in the dark, and I analyzed it all like a researcher, clinical, detached, no crying, just facts and data and patterns. And I wrote about the psychological impact of being the least prioritized child, about how families create hierarchies without ever admitting it, about the long-term damage of chronic emotional neglect. Mrs. Chen read my first draft during her office hours, and she looked up at me with something like shock in her eyes and said, Riley, is this about you? And I nodded and said every single word, and she said gently, I think you need to show this to someone, a counselor, your parents, someone who can help, because this is not just a school project anymore, is it? And I said, no, it is evidence. 2 weeks later, I stood at the front of my psychology class with my slides projected on the screen behind me, and I presented my project, and I told my story calmly, clearly, without crying, and the room went completely silent. And when I played that video of myself alone on New Year's Eve, my voice saying, I am completely alone, my family left me, some of my classmates looked away uncomfortable, and some looked angry, and one girl in the back row started crying, and Mrs. Chen's jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jumping. And when I finished, I said, and my parents still do not think anything is wrong. After class, 3 students came up to me, and one hugged me without asking, and another said, my parents did the same thing to me, thank you for saying it out loud, and the third said, you are so brave. And I did not feel brave. I felt like I had just ripped open a wound in front of strangers. But Mrs. Chen pulled me aside and said, this needs to go further. I am mandating a meeting with the school counselor, and I am recommending we contact your parents. And I felt panic rise in my throat and said, will I get in trouble? And she said firmly, no, but they might. That meeting happened on a Friday afternoon, and my parents sat across from me in the counselor's office looking confused and annoyed, and the counselor, Miss Reyes, had my entire project printed out in front of her, and she said, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, your daughter has brought some very concerning patterns to our attention. And my mom cut her off immediately and said, this is about New Year's Eve, is not it, Riley? We apologized. We said we were sorry. It was one mistake. It was not one time. I said, my voice steady, and I slid the packet across the table and said, I documented years. And Miss Reyes said, birthdays, holidays, school events, all ignored or forgotten. This shows a clear pattern of emotional neglect. And my dad's face went red, and he said, this is ridiculous. We are good parents. We provide everything she needs. And Miss Reyes said calmly, providing basic needs is not the same as emotional presence. Your daughter recorded herself alone on a major holiday. Because you forgot her, that is not a small mistake. My mom looked down at the video still on the page and her face went pale and she stammered. We thought she would be fine. She is almost an adult. And I said she needed you to remember she was your child first and you did not. And the room went so quiet. You could hear people breathing. And my dad looked at me maybe for the first time in years and said, Riley, I do not know what you want from us. I want you to see me, I said simply. I want to matter. I want to stop being the kid you remember last. And Miss Reyes recommended family therapy. And my parents agreed mostly because the school made it very clear this was not optional. And on the drive home, nobody spoke. And when we pulled into the driveway, my mom turned around and said, Riley, I am sorry I did not realize it was that bad. And I said, that is the problem. It should not have taken a school counselor and a presentation in front of my class for you to realize. Therapy started the next week and it was awkward and painful and uncomfortable, and my parents did not like hearing how badly they had failed me. And Madison and Tyler sat in on one session, and even they started to see it the favorites, the forgotten, the imbalance, and it did not fix everything overnight. But it started something real, and that next New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year later, we stayed home all 5 of us together, and my mom asked me 3 separate times that day if I was okay, if I needed anything, and my dad made my favorite dinner, and Madison set up a movie marathon. And at 11:50 p.m. they gathered around me, not the TV, not their phones, but me. And when the countdown started, they all shouted the numbers together, looking right at me. And when midnight hit, my mom said with tears in her eyes, Happy New Year, Riley. I love you. And I said I love you too. And this time I actually believed she meant it. Because revenge is not always loud and destructive. Sometimes it is just refusing to stay invisible. Sometimes it is taking all that pain and turning it into evidence that nobody can deny, and making the people who forgot you finally see the damage they caused. And what I recorded that night alone in the dark changed everything. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. So tell me, if your family ever left you behind on the one night everyone is supposed to be together, would you stay silent and protect them, or would you do what I did and make absolutely sure they could never forget again?